Hey there, welcome back everyone to the Cranbourne East Secondary Podcast. This week we don't have a special guest, that's okay, but we have us per usual, which is we have
Mr. Young, and I teach Year 9 Science and STEM and Food Tech as usual. And
and
we
of
have
course we've got me, Mr. L, and I teach a bunch of science, different classes and so on. Okay, well, today it's an extremely hot day outside. It's actually COVID season still, so that's why we're recording in two separate rooms. Unfortunately, we've gone back to this format for a little bit. Hopefully things will be better where we can record back in person again. Now, hot days like this and such a nice day outside, it actually reminds me back of where I would want to be right now, Mr. Young. I don't know about you, but I was actually hoping to talk a bit about, excursions. I think, I don't know about you, Mr. Young, but one of the key excursions I remembered going to, I was probably around year 10, and it involved being a nice sunny day like this, which is why I just randomly brought it up. But I don't know,
yeah,
have you been on any excursions as a teacher here for our school?
I haven't. Not, the only excursions I've been on were for this year, which was for STEM, and we basically went on a 3-day excursion, and that was where I had the students. They were learning how to do a lot of new things that they haven't done before. So things like 3D printing, designing environments in virtual reality, making their own plastics, just a lot of really cool stuff. And that was really, really cool to see, actually. I wish I got to do that as a student as well.
That's cool.
How about you,
Yeah.
Mr. L?
Well, as a teacher, I think back when I started going to excursions, STEM wasn't a subject yet. But the key ones, I mean, the last one I remember before COVID was I used to go to City Experience quite often. So City Experience, I remember last year we were able to go with the Year 9s to the Magistrates Court. But yeah, we were meant to have like another 3 more excursions because for P2S every year in Year 9, and also for humanities, we're meant to go to visit the Shrine of Remembrance. We go rock climbing. We go to the Queen Vic Market, which is like one of my favorites, right? And we also go to the Magistrates Court. But unfortunately, last year we only were able to go to the one. The previous year, I remember going to all of them pretty much. Did you have city experience as a high schooler, Mr. Young?
Oh, actually, yes, I did. It was a little bit different to city experience from memory for Cranbourne East.
Yep.
So what happened for us was we went on a city experience, but that was for also kind of like a P2S subject, and it
Okay.
was over 2 days. So we actually went to a motel and stayed at a motel overnight in the city as well.
Yep. Yep. I
So that's
remember
how
some
it might
schools
be a
do
bit
that.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes they call it city camp as well, don't they?
Yeah. So ours was called City Camp, and basically we had a kind of like a passion project where you had to like research about something about the city, and that helped determine the path you would take in your class group. So your home group would just go through all of the venues where for your group. So for example, I had the MCG, even I don't really follow footy. I had the MCG, and then yeah, we just went to the MCG, did a bit of research, talked about it, gave a presentation. So yeah, that was what we did for the city experience in my previous school.
Okay. Yeah, I remember like because our P2, I mean not P2S, our city experience here at Cranbourne East Secondary is 1 day a term, right? 1 day a term, you go out to the city, and sometimes we even let the students go out to the city by themselves. Meet us at Cranbourne Station first, take the train themselves. I remember that I've always had a bad luck streak as a student. It seemed like my year level always missed out on everything. So one example is when I was in grade 6, right? Our school's tradition always was at the end of every grade 6 as a graduation, the whole school comes out and watches the grade 6s have a water fight, right? The year it was my school's turn to do the water fight, it was like a major drought that year. And so
Oh,
water was banned, right? And so we had to make teddy bears instead. And then another example was in year 9, we didn't have city experience. But then when
huh.
we were in year 10, they introduced city experience to the year 9s. for the first time. So my best mate, who's also a teacher, he was in the year level below me. And so how they did city experience, and I know some schools do it like this, they don't stay overnight and it's not one day a term, but what they do is that it's 5 days, 1 week, and they go to the city every single day that week to do a different activity. So they concentrate on that. Yeah, so that's the city experience that I missed out on as a high schooler. Yeah, so it was quite unfortunate. That's why I think even now I'm pretty bad with memorizing, like, okay, what comes after Hoddle Street? Is it this one, or, you know, Queens or Elizabeth? And, you know, I'm actually really bad. Like some people who, especially if they went to uni in the city, like Melbourne Uni, for example, they know, oh yeah, Lonsdale, Healesville, Lonsdale, Collins, whatever. You can't?
No, I'm directly challenged, so I can't.
Yeah, I have no idea. So even till this day, when people say, hey, let's go here in the city, I still need to use my Google Maps to get there, which is annoying. Yeah.
Nah,
I don't know.
I rely on Google Maps probably too much to get around the city. Like, so city experience didn't really help me too much, but it was a good experience.
That's good. Yeah. And do you remember any other excursions that you went on, whether it was in primary school or high school?
So my favorite one was when I was in year 8. It was a really hot day. I think on that day was 43.
Yep.
And so the excursion that we actually had planned was scuba diving.
Oh.
So yeah,
In high school.
fancy private school stuff. We went scuba diving. So we saw some seals. I remember at one point they were telling us how seals actually have a distinct mating signal, which is where, like, if you accidentally did a number 1 in the water, the seals would actually come over and then like take that as a mating call, and they'll like kind of expose you if you did anything.
Oh, wow.
So it was like really interesting to see. No one did it, obviously. I think that was really good. Personal hygiene is nice. But then I remember at one point, everyone was pointing at me during the scuba dive, and I was like, what's wrong? And they're trying to yell at me that there's a giant jellyfish behind my head, like directly behind me. So imagine my head's here, the jellyfish was right here. So I literally just turned around, saw it, and then flinched and like just started swimming away. So yeah, that was probably the scariest and the best excursion I've been on.
It goes hand in hand.
How about you, Stell?
I did go scuba diving before, but I didn't go with my high school. I went with my uni, actually. I was doing a subject on aquatic life, so like marine life, marine science. And I remember, same thing, we went out on a boat, we went scuba diving to check out the seals. And at one point, they were like, look, it only happens every once in a while if you're lucky, but sometimes there may be dolphins that will swim beside a boat. And if they do, we have these ropes and this pole that sticks out from the boat. You just grab a rope and you jump in the water, and the boat will drag you next to the dolphins. And there were dolphins, and I jumped in. That was really nice. But we weren't told about the mating part. What we were told about was something else instead, which was the fact that seals, if they come up and swim up to your face and they blow bubbles or blow a bubble ring in your face, we tend to think that it's cute, but it's actually their like aggression warning behavior that don't come any closer, actually. So we were told if they look like they do that and look like it's really cute, just make sure you back away, just swim away. So yeah, that was one thing that I remember from that excursion. But yeah, I think one of the most funnest excursions that I remember being on, sorry, English teachers. The one that I was thinking about in terms of the sunny day outside and a hint of danger. I remember we went to Rosebud Beach. I think it would have been Rosebud Beach. I'm trying to remember what the excursion was about. I think it would have been something to do with geography, potentially, and looking at like land formations, right? And I remember going out to the beach, and so it was a lunch break. I remember going out with a few mates, and so we thought, you know what, why don't we just dip our feet into the water? So we, rolled up our shorts, took off our socks and shoes, and so we went out to the sand in the water. So the water was shallow enough, our knees could probably fit through. We're walking through, and suddenly there was probably like 4 or 5 of us. We were like, wait, guys, stop. and we looked down in the water because it's very clear, very shallow. What we saw there was this crab. It was probably this big, and it was like this, and we're like, all right, guys, let's not move. Let's just stay there. And then suddenly the crab nestled itself into the sand so that we couldn't see it. So we screamed our heads off and started running back the opposite direction. Like, and in water, you can't run fast. So we're like making splashes everywhere. But that was a really fun excursion. I remember eating the fish and chips there. And yeah, it was a really nice excursion, that one. So that's one of the ones that I remember quite well.
I feel like all the excursions that revolves around like really getting outdoors and being with nature, so like on the beach or like even just scuba diving, I feel like those ones tend to be the more memorable ones.
Memorable?
Just because memorable, yes. I'm like, is that English? Memorable experiences, mainly because I feel like a lot of our experiences are within a building, like within school or within an institute, which so it's just basically those ones tend to be the more out there ones, which for me at least, makes it extremely fun.
Yep. I think in terms of indoor ones, like I remember it was either my first year of teaching actually here. One excursion that we used to do at Cranbourne East Secondary was to take students out to the Yakult factory to look at bacteria, chemistry, stuff like that. So I remember that one. Yeah, it was indoor one. It was just them showing us around the factory, having a little bit of samples. So it wasn't too memorable, and that's why I guess we stopped going to it. It was very nice. People there were very nice, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have a whole bunch of year nines. Them looking at factory machinery wasn't exactly most ideal. So, I think I remember for myself, geography once again, going to the city. We went up Eureka Tower to look at the general area of Melbourne, looking at a distance, looking at topography, so like looking at the mountain structures and stuff like that. That was another key one. Have you ever been on any excursions that were close to your school, Mr. Young, where technically you didn't have to jump on a bus, where you just walked there from your school that was like close enough?
I don't think we have.
Okay.
But because mainly like every excursion, they're like, oh, we just have some private buses, we'll just take you by bus. It's fine. So when we do like just walk or take public transport, it tends to be like towards a local park, just so we could host our athletics day,
stuff like that,
or any of those like house events.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, I remember just because I said that, because I remember there was one key excursion I remember from primary school. I don't know why random came to my head, but there was a 7-Eleven across the road from my primary school that I went to. And now what we were learning Chinese, Mandarin, right? So I think our Mandarin teacher probably knew the store owner there or something. So the excursion pretty much was and it was really good to come, like thinking about it now as an adult, thinking about the excursion, I was probably grade 3 or grade 4 at the time only. But what we were trained to do or taught to do was to like say some general Mandarin phrases, right? Like, hello, I would like to buy this. How much is it? Thank you very much. Something like that. So after we had been learning it, the excursion was we went across the road to that 7-Eleven, and the parents were told beforehand, hey, give all your kids like $5 each so that they can buy some things around the store, right? And then we had to do it all in Mandarin to the person behind the counter. So I think stuff like that is very interesting. That stuff like that interests me as a teacher. I always think about what are excursions that I would want to run my cohort that potentially doesn't need to waste money or time even. So even I remember one time taking my year 9s or year 7, year 7s actually a few years ago out to the wetlands at the back over there. Of course, I had to get clearance because apparently sometimes there can be snakes there. So I had to go through like proper, like, okay, this is what you do in this situation. And so what we actually did, I actually got the keys to go to the wetlands, and we're looking at like wildlife, different types of plants, different types of animals, but we had to like stay with our backs towards the fences and stuff like that. It was pretty interesting looking at, just even the back of our school where the oval is. Because, I think a lot of students, if you go to the oval, you'll see those wetlands, you'll see that fence, you'll wonder what it is. it used to be accessible to our school, but then I think they're just worried about snakes now these days. That's why we can't.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I feel like it's really interesting because you don't really get to look around school too much, like not like in school, but like just the area around it, unless you do travel by public transport, or if you even just don't even go to that side of school. So sometimes it just becomes really interesting and fun to even see what's around you as well. So yeah, that actually I would say would be one excursion that would be nice to go on again, like be able to go on, just so that like kids or everyone knows what's around school, kind of gets more comfy with the environment as well.
It's always good. Yeah, I think learning about your local community is always just as effective as going out to the city, you know. I think the city is an important one because eventually a lot of you students might be finding jobs out there in the city. So it's good to know your way about public transport, right? How to get the my key and all that stuff. But then around our local community area, that's also stuff as well because I've even seen at times when you partnering with the local community that could actually get you to volunteer for stuff once you finish school, and that could lead to a potential career. And that stuff's really good. Yeah, I know, but I've always been really keen on excursions. I remember one that I used to go on quite a bit with the year sevens here was we used to go to Melbourne Zoo, right? But then what we realized was that the problem with Melbourne Zoo was that we would be stuck in traffic. It was like close to 2 hours every morning peak hour from Cranbourne East to the city, and then from the city back. It was like 4 hours in the bus. And so by the time we got out, we went around the zoo. We pretty much ran out of time already. So we don't do that excursion anymore. But what we do instead is that we've switched it to Healesville instead. We've switched it to Healesville Sanctuary, which, you know, it's still quite a lot of animals. I remember going as a biology excursion as a bio student. There was no animals there yet at the time. It was so boring. But these days, it's almost like another, you know, Melbourne Zoo. It's like got a lot of different animals. We compare stuff like that. Yeah. Do you remember going on a lot of like zoo excursions or aquarium, for example?
Oh, I definitely did go to the zoo at one point. I think it was the Melbourne Zoo. But because my school is a lot closer to the city than Cranbourne East, so it's probably like 3/4 of the way closer to the city, I reckon.
Okay.
So like it ended up being like a half-an-hour trip
Yep.
to there and then half-an-hour trip back. So yeah, our excursion was pretty good, mainly because they gave us the time to do everything, and like you had your worksheet and you'd go through the worksheet and just make sure you like ticked everything off. So yeah, it was fun. Like I feel like that was a nice one, but I don't think they repeated it a lot. So I think they tried it out and then they maybe got rid of it at one point.
The reason I bring that up is because now that I think about it, I do remember one excursion probably when I was in year 10. It would have been around year 10, another year 10 excursion again, where we went to Melbourne Aquarium. And the interesting thing this time was there was actually an Australian actress, Lisa McCune. Some of you may or may not know her, but she was the host of a documentary series where she is like about wildlife and stuff like that. And so that episode, she was talking about like Australian marine life. So she was recording there. So they were filming there. And so yeah, there was the whole camera crew. We had to wait for them to finish. And then we all went by to say hi, past her, like went by her to say hi to her, stuff like that. So that was a pretty memorable one in that sense. Like, oh, look, they're filming. And then surely enough, you know, in a few months' time, you know, there was that segment on the TV. It was like Channel 7 or something like that. So yeah, Melbourne Aquarium is always an interesting one, but I've always thought about swimming with sharks. I don't know if I'll ever do it. I think I would want to do it, swimming with sharks. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would too. Like it'd be like a massive adrenaline rush. But like I think as long as you're not being silly, like sticking a hand out of the cage, you'll be fine.
I'm talking about like at Melbourne Aquarium though, no cage. Would you do it without a cage?
Right. Actually, I feel one thing I've heard was like the reason why so they were saying like the reason why sharks can attack humans
Mm.
is because the way we swim is similar to how seals swim. That was one thing I was reading. Or seals or dolphins?
I think it's mainly, especially when you're on a surfboard. So
Mm.
they do a comparison of a seal swimming. If you look from a bottom view up, and then of a human on a surfboard with the arms and the legs out, it does look like a seal. So that's why they would attack you. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, not too
There
sure
was
about
this like
scuba
whole
diving.
story I was told.
Not too sure about scuba diving though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
No, there was like this whole story that was told in school for us, where it's like there was one person who got shipwrecked out in the ocean,
Oh, okay.
and then they were worried that sharks would actually come and like attack them.
Yep.
So the whole time they tried doing that dolphin swimming technique,
Yep.
where you just like kind of
Yep.
literally just do that with your
Yep.
whole body.
Yep.
And yeah, they got back to shore safe apparently, which is kind of
Oh.
interesting. Like it would have been a long swim.
Yeah,
So,
and very
yeah.
tiring if you swim like a dolphin.
Yeah,
Very tiring.
exactly.
A lot of core muscles.
Yeah, which I do not have.
Me neither.
So yeah, no, like I feel like, well, like swimming with the sharks, that would be pretty cool as long as there's someone that's professional and can take care of any situation.
Yep.
I reckon.
Yeah,
I'd be down
true
for that.
True that. Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Young, we do have around 10 minutes left. So, why don't we start our watch list a little bit early? Because I feel like my one, I do want to discuss it quite a bit more into detail anyway. I don't want to just make it short. So, do you want to talk about your one first and then we can discuss it and then we'll go with my one?
Yeah, sure. So my recommendation for this episode is a Korean drama that I have binge watched in one day. It's 20 episodes. Yeah. So it's called Goodbye, My Wife.
Yep.
And you might be like, oh, what's that? So basically, the whole 20 episodes is about this one mixed martial artist trying to divorce his, basically the perfect wife. So she is the perfect wife and he lost interest in her. So that relationship was kind of a bit weird. And so he's like trying to do things to make it so that the divorce is legal. And then she's like just overcoming everything by being like the perfect saint, such as like at one point he's like giving her his card, and he's like, oh, spend $220,000.
Yeah,
like just go out and do it.
Yeah.
Like go and spend as much as you want.
Yeah.
And then so she goes through multiple days of not spending that much money and just buying like what's necessity for the both of them to live.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, she's not spending enough money. I can't do anything. And then suddenly he gets a notification that she spent $220,000.
Yeah.
And the scene before is that she's like looking at cars.
Yeah.
But then it turns out what she did was she made a donation to a church under his name for $220,000. And then that helped him increase his publicity as well.
Yeah.
And so it's like, she's ruining everything.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and
it was really, really good.
Was each episode 1 hour?
Yeah. So it was 1 hour. I binge watched it in a day.
So you had 4 hours of sleep-ish, kind of.
Oh no, this is on the weekend.
Okay. Okay, so you slept through the whole weekend.
I got my sleep.
So you slept through the remaining of the weekend.
Yeah, it was like,
Is this one on Netflix?
Yeah, it's on Netflix actually. So just Goodbye, My Wife. And then there's a bit of a twist and you realize why it's called Goodbye, My Wife. But yeah, it's nice.
Okay, classic.
I highly recommend watching it.
I can think of a few cliches and tropes around why he may want to, but I'm not going to go into it in case it's a spoiler, because I'm sometimes pretty I'm pretty perceptive of these things, especially Korean dramas that tend to follow a same formula. I can think of like probably 1 or 2 reasons why potentially they would want to divorce such a perfect wife, but I'll leave it there. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so which one was yours?
I actually want to talk about a really, really old film. So I don't know if this is on Netflix or not. It may be, or it may not be, but it's so old that potentially you might be able to find it in quite a few different places. So this film is called Seven Samurai. So It's from the 1950s, so it's black and white. But don't let that stop you from watching it, because the movie pretty much is from a very famous Japanese director, Akira Kurosawa, who's made a whole bunch of very famous samurai-like movies. And the reason why it's so influential is because so many American films, filmmakers actually, after watching that film Seven Samurai, it has inspired them to make their own movies. So, for example, one of the most common examples that people bring up was a film called The Magnificent Seven, which is about like seven cowboys who come to a town to save the town. And then there was a reboot of Magnificent Seven again sometime, I think within the last 5 years or so, where Chris Pratt was one of them, I remember. Even he was one of the cowboys. But the original Seven Samurai, the story is around these seven Ronin. So Ronin are like samurais who don't have a lord or don't have a master that they serve. So they're for hire. You pay them enough, they'll come and help you out, right? So there's seven of them. And there's this one farming village where what happens around the season of when they're getting the crops, right? They would always get attacked by bandits, and the bandits will come along and steal all their crops, so there won't be enough in the town. So what happens was then these seven samurai get hired, and they try to defend this town. And the interesting thing is, it's not like your classic. It's not a sad ending, but it's not a happy ending either. It's like, you're like very stock standard. Oh, they lived happily ever after, And you see some of the interesting Japanese culture influences in it, and like the way of thinking and their way of life was very different back then as well. Like what it means to be honorable, for example, what it means to bring honor to your name and to your title, So the fighting, is pretty cool. It's not like how movies these days, when they show fighting, it's always like close-ups and then you can see everything. But fighting movies and war movies back then was like always zoomed out, and you can kind of see the action going on live, And there's some archery scenes where they're just so badass as well. So, there was a phase when I was really into samurai movies because I started playing Samurai Warriors. And so I started hearing about, I started watching some Japanese stories based on that era, that period of like the warring states and so on. So yeah, that's how I found it. And then till this day, I still find every once in a while random Japanese samurai movies. There's a few on Netflix even right now. And just like samurai games, like even the Nintendo Direct yesterday had like a new Samurai Warriors coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like I completely back you with the whole like phase. I think it's quite a standard thing, like to have like a samurai phase nowadays. Like because like back then I used to be obsessed with ninjas and samurai.
Ninjas or samurai.
And then so like at one point I wanted to have a samurai sword as decor in my room.
Yeah.
Didn't get one for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, like everything samurai and ninja always fascinated me as a kid.
Yep.
So, yeah.
In Japan, you can actually I remember when I went to Japan, those ceremonial swords are sold everywhere, and they even have like a little tag underneath that explains if you were to bring this back to your home country through customs, this is what needs to be done. Here's our certificate to show, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what ceremonial swords are swords that are, I don't know if they're usually sharp or blunt, but I know the ones that they were selling in Japan for tourists were blunt. It's more of the art of the actual sheath of the sword and the stand, and people just put it in a room as a display more so than as an actual weapon. That's what they call a ceremonial sword. Yeah.
Yeah. My grandpa had one for like a ceremonial sword, but not as a samurai one. Apparently it was for his involvement in the army back when he was young. So he had his own ceremonial sword. That was really cool as well.
Yep, they get those. Cool. All right.
Yeah, I have a watch of that. Seven Samurai?
Yep, Seven Samurai.
Yeah. I might have a watch of that. I'll see if I can find it on Netflix or something.
Yeah, it's a classic. So it'll be around somewhere. Yeah, a lot of filmmakers refer to it and pay homage to that movie. So yeah. Yeah. Cool. So, well, we at school are about to have our bell go off. So that's why we'll finish up here today. Yeah, if you do have any feedback in terms of excursions that you've been on, or you want to share stories, definitely we will, I guess, share around, or we can take it into consideration when discussing other topics in the future. Or yeah, if you do want, if you've got excursion ideas, then talk to your teachers about it. You know, they'll see what they can do, you know, especially if you know any local stuff that's worth it. Yeah, you know, I'm pretty sure your teachers would love to go out to those as well. Cool. That's all from us today. We hope you all have a good week ahead, and we'll catch you all next time. Bye,
See ya.
everyone.